when we don't do that, science is actually now finally catching up and physically proving how holding on to our emotions our whole lives and holding on to the energy of pain or trauma actually changes the molecular structure of our cells and leads to disease, let alone leads you to feel so uncomfortable in your body that we're constantly reaching for sugar to try to feel better, to get that dopamine hit. So there's a lot of pieces here really tied together that are, in simple terms, just causing us to feel so uncomfortable in our bodies on a day-to-day basis, especially if something difficult shows up. I don't know how to handle stress, or I don't know how to, I'm feeling sad. I'm just going to escape, right? I want to numb out. I want to feel better immediately because feeling sad's not safe or feeling angry is not safe in my body. That's the subconscious messaging that we have running in the background. So I'm just going to go and have some ice cream or a glass of wine, or I'm just going to get out of this as quick as I can.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be? Into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. Today I have on the show Danielle Daem, and Dani is a sugar freedom expert and somatic embodiment coach, and she's passionate about helping women reshape their relationship with sugar so they can reclaim control over their health and energy once and for all. She has a story of her own sugar addiction and how she overcame that, and she knows firsthand how difficult and how overwhelming this experience can be and this journey can be in overcoming this addiction. And in this episode, we're talking about all things sugar, but sugar freedom, because she is the sugar freedom expert. And really the real reasons that most women are hooked on sugar and not able to give it up. And we're not really talking about the sciencey stuff here. We dive a little bit into, how sugar can affect the body and the hormones. There's a deeper issue at play that we're going to talk about here. And I love Dani's take on this. We talked about this. I was also on her show. So you go check out her interview on her own podcast that she has. It's called the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. But we really dive deep into the conversation about root causes of sugar dependency and what it really means from a somatic level, from a body level, and where this comes from, and really how to create a healthy, long-lasting relationship with sugar and what that looks like. So I think you're going to have some mindset shifts here that are going to take place, because this is a totally different conversation that most people have around sugar. So I'm excited to bring you all this. Let's jump in. Okay, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Danielle, and we are talking all things sugar and our relationship with food and sugar. And as we're talking about before we hopped on, I feel like more and more I'm having more conversations with women about kind of that, their relationship with food and not necessarily trusting themselves around sugar and food. And so Danielle is going to break this down for us and kind of get into the deeper weeds here around food and sugar. So thanks so much for joining me today, Danielle.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Hope. I'm so excited to be here. I know I just had you on my show, and now I'm coming on yours. So this has been awesome to have some good conversations with you.
Yes, it is. I love a good swap. That's my favorite, is being able to exchange ideas and each other's. I love it. So fun. Okay, so let's start with just talking about sugar. So this is your world. She is literally the sugar freedom expert, y'all. This is her title. This is what I told you in the intro. And so you see this more than anyone, how women especially, right? This relationship we have with sugar. And I feel like I told you before we started recording, women, they kind of start eating it and then they can't stop. It's they get into this cycle where they can't stop. So can you kind of speak to the reason, right? What are the real reasons why women get hooked on sugar and they just can't get out of that cycle?
Yes. Okay. We're starting with a big one. We're going in big.
We're jumping in.
We're not fooling around here. So yeah, this is obviously a huge question and something I could talk about for hours. So I'll do my best to really condense this down for everyone. But I really just want to acknowledge that this isn't just women. Of course, I work exclusively with women, but I also know all the men out there in the world who are struggling with this slightly differently, because they don't have the same hormonal challenges or the same belief systems and the same things that we grow up with as women specifically. So just if there's any men listening, you're counted on this too. But for the women listening, this is really my area of expertise. What I've really seen, I mean, I've been doing this work, obviously coming off the tail end of my own addiction to sugar my whole life, my own healing journey. And I've been helping women really break free and create a healthy relationship with sugar, ultimately by creating a healthy relationship with themselves for the past 6 years. So doing some of the really deep work. And what I've really seen actually early on in my practice, I really, really quickly noticed that, and I'm willing to bet a lot of you may be listening to this if you resonate with having a dependency on sugar or just being ravished by sugar cravings all day, or if you even resonate with the term addiction, around sugar, that there's this belief and understanding, and I used to have this too, that it's really all about just getting off of sugar, right? And willpower. So I just need to get off sugar and stay off it for a couple months or a month, 30 days, 60 days, and then all my problems will be solved. And I really quickly realized, as I was even helping my clients do that at the beginning of my years ago, just detoxing from sugar, and really realized that there's this secondary component that really makes it so hard that most people ignore. And this is where I'm more and more passionate about, and really my area of expertise lies, is in the mental, emotional, psychological reasons why we are using food to cope, right? The reasons why we're truly addicted from a mental, a nervous system, an energetic standpoint. So I want everybody just to understand that when it comes to the world of really like unhealthy food habits, right? And some of you might not even resonate with the sugar piece. Some of you might think, well, I binge eat on chips, right? Or I can't stop eating pasta or bread. A little newsflash, those are actually sugar, all of those. So those unhealthy eating patterns in whatever way they're showing up for you, especially around the compulsion with carbohydrates, simple processed foods, carbohydrates, sugars, have a huge physical component, obviously. And we'll talk more about that for sure. There's a huge physical reason why our brain and our gut are telling us, keep eating the sugar. But there's this piece that most people forget, and they're equal 50-50 partners in the reason why we're driven towards these unhealthy habits with food. It's that inner work stuff that really, like I said, the psychological, the trauma imprints, the emotional relationship with ourselves and food. So this is the area that I really love specializing in. And I know we'll talk more about, but I just wanted to preface this whole chat that we're going to have today with those two pieces. And everyone listening understands that it's not just the physical piece. Right. It's not just about what we see on the outside, right? How to cook, what to buy at the grocery store, the meal planning, those are all 3D reality physical things. And those are great, but they're only going to get you so far. Willpower only gets you so far. We have a limited resource there. So we have to start really looking in and changing who we are and how we think about ourselves, our belief systems, our all the inner stuff that we're going to definitely dive more into, if we really want to create that lasting, peaceful relationship with food that I know most of us do.
Yeah. So let's get into that then. I think let's look at, because I think it's like anything, right? I think, and I'd say this all the time about my work too, people of course, we want the physical benefits, right? We want, with my world, it's I tell everybody, I know you want to get rid of the symptoms, but there is always an energetic, mental, emotional, spiritual piece to it too, right? There's deeper stuff that is, it's expressing itself physically. And so what does that look like when we're looking at sugar? What are in your experience, what are those deeper things at play that are showing itself physically?
Yeah, I love that. Yes. Thank you for asking. So I love to sort of give the visual and the analogy of building a house when I talk about this. So when we're talking specifically about these inner pieces, I'm just going to call it the inner work for now, the inner stuff, right? Yeah. Okay. We're not talking about the food and obviously blood sugar and all of the physical pieces are there as well. But this inner work stuff. So I like just imagining a house, right? Imagining you're building a house. You're trying to build this version of yourself that isn't addicted to sugar, has a peaceful relationship with food and feels good in her body and trusts herself and is in tune with her intuition. You're trying to build this beautiful version of health and the life that you want. But what most of us are trying to do is building this house without looking at all of the cracks in the foundation. So most of us have, and this is how I kind of want you to think of these inner pieces that are a part of all of us as human beings on this planet. There is not one of us that is immune to having cracks in our foundation. So we have to start looking at that, right? Because if we start building a house, we're trying to build new healthy habits and we're trying to meal plan and we're going to the gym and we're trying to build these new parts of us. But our foundation is cracked, eventually our house is just going to fall over, right? A strong wind is going to come by and our whole house is going to crumble and we're going to be binging again and emotional eating, watching Netflix on the couch at the end of the day, and the roller coaster repeats. So your question is, what are those cracks, right? What are those pieces in our foundation that we do need to commit to a healing journey with? And there's really a few common ones that I'll just mention here. Obviously, each of these could be a podcast on their own. Right. And I do talk about each of these a lot on my podcast. But I just want to mention that there's a ton of different inner wounds that we could really look at. And I don't want to share the whole list with all of you because it can be a bit overwhelming and I don't want anybody to be overwhelmed here, but just understanding that as we start working on ourselves and working on healing our inner world and our emotions and our energy, everything starts to really weave together. So if you start focusing on shifting, your belief systems about yourself and really working on regulating your nervous system and maybe healing trauma, like all of that has a trickle effect into the other cracks in your foundation as well. So I mentioned a few there. So a couple of the really, really big ones that I see, especially when it comes to at the root of leading us to cope and escape and numb out with food, right? These patterns that we have with food. Number one is our emotions. So number one is really our emotional connection to food and essentially just our ability to even feel emotions. So there's some big pieces going on here, and I'm really quickly going to share this because there's so much more, but the truth of the matter is most of us have been raised in a society where we just don't honor our emotions, right? We're taught, our society and the structures that we have in place are very masculine energy, are very, just suck it up, be strong, don't be so sensitive. Emotions are not talked about in our childhood homes usually. I mean, at least for all of my clients and myself, we don't honor emotions. We don't know how to actually have a safe and healthy emotional expression. We start to believe that there's something wrong with having emotions, right? Or I have to stop my emotions in order to fit in and to be liked, and just all of these mechanisms that come into play. And we learn this in our younger years in a really big way, those imprints and those beliefs about emotions. So what happens is we start putting these layers up and these walls up around our emotions and around, in all honesty, around our true authentic selves, right? Because we are, as human beings, emotional beings, especially women, especially us women. And we've been taught that that's something bad. And it's something that people joke about or make fun of us for. And it needs to stop because it is causing us so much disharmony in our bodies and really causing us to escape and numb out and just not know what to do when difficult emotions come up. So not really knowing that it's good and important and really learning how to feel. And then at the same time, we're also not taught how to express, right? How to actually process emotions, right? So there's a lot of tools and skills we need to relearn that our society has never supported us with. And it's nobody's fault. It's not your parents' fault. It's really just a byproduct of the way that our society is built and what we thought was how we raised kids and how we operate, right? It's kind of inconvenient to fall apart at work, right? And to just be bawling your eyes out. So that is a big area that I always start with my clients first, is starting to build some of that emotional resiliency. And there's lots of ways we can do that. We can talk about that later, but really starting to learn how to honor our emotional expressions. And really in that emotional component, when we do that, we're also tapping into like the second crack foundational piece is really trauma, really understanding. But I'm such a fan of the work of Gabor Mate and his work around addiction, trauma and addiction, and our inability to feel safe in our body, right? That's essentially what trauma does, whether it's big T or little t, it imprints on our nervous system. And really a lot of things come from that, obviously, but this belief of it's not safe to either be in my body, or it's not safe to express myself, or just I'm not safe here. And those safety pieces really cause us to spend our lives morphing and shaping into someone that is different than who we truly are, right? So there's a lot of layers to this, let alone the energetic and emotional imprint that when something traumatic happens, which by the way, we've all had, every single human, it's literally a part of being a human being on the planet. We have something, whether it was the absence of something in childhood or a traumatic event, like we all have something that's imprinted us, and the energy of that and just the emotions of that, let alone being alone in our pain or in our challenging situations that came up, these things are still stored in our body. So this, you can see, is really tied into the emotional work that I was just talking about, is like we need to begin releasing the toxic energy of these heavy emotions, whether it's the grief, the anger, the rage, the frustration, the sadness that needs to be released, right? So when we don't do that, science is actually now finally catching up and physically proving how holding on to our emotions our whole lives and holding on to the energy of pain or trauma actually changes the molecular structure of our cells and leads to disease, let alone leads you to feel so uncomfortable in your body that we're constantly reaching for sugar to try to feel better, to get that dopamine hit. So there's a lot of pieces here really tied together that are, in simple terms, just causing us to feel so uncomfortable in our bodies on a day-to-day basis, especially if something difficult shows up. Like, I don't know how to handle stress, or I don't know how to, I'm feeling sad. I'm just going to escape, right? I want to numb out. I want to feel better immediately because feeling sad's not safe, or feeling angry is not safe in my body. That's the subconscious messaging that we have running in the background. So I'm just going to go and have some ice cream or a glass of wine, or I'm just going to get out of this as quick as I can. So these pieces, I know I kind of just, the last one that I'll mention here, not last at all, we definitely still have to look at our belief systems about ourselves. Most of us are walking around with the I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not enough. Like, those are the three core belief wounds that I think we all carry to some degree as humans. And at the root, are really, again, causing this disharmony from within ourselves. So we feel disconnected from ourselves. We feel disconnected from the world. We start hating on ourselves and talking badly to ourselves. So rewiring a lot of those patterns and beliefs is going to be really, really important if we want to nourish our bodies, right? And stop self-sabotaging and being in these, unhealthy patterns that we may have, whether it's with food or relationships and all those pieces. And then I promise the last one that I'll mention here that I'm still learning more about, but I'm really fascinated about in my own journey, is just this understanding that, and I mentioned this a little bit already, but this understanding that the world that we live in has actually called us from a young age to be shaped into someone that may not really be our true selves. So we see this in social conditioning. We see this in schools. We see this in children growing up. To fit into a society, we've got these boundaries. Like, don't be too loud, right? But also don't be too quiet or too pretty or too ugly, right? Like, we have to fit in this mold. And we as infants and young children learn very quickly, how are we best going to fit in so that we survive? And in that process, we actually unlearn how to be ourselves. And I know that most women, and I've been through this myself at a younger age than most, but most women, this is where the midlife crisis comes in, because we have totally lost touch with who we truly are. We have no sense of identity outside of labels like I'm a mom, or I work at this company, right? Or I'm a woman, or I'm a Canadian, right? Like, we just label ourselves and we think that that's our true identity. And it's not. It's what the identity that society has put on us. So there needs to be this coming home to self. And this is a big piece of work that I do with my clients is, who am I? And this is a big question, right? Like, this is a lifelong quest to who am I? But I know for me, that process has been in healing my inner child, learning to tap back into play and joy and fun. And in that, I'm starting to discover, like, oh, Dani's really silly and she's really bright and joyful, and like these true essences that were there for me as a child that essentially just shaped out of me, right? In adulting, be adult, be serious, right? And I'm not doing that anymore. More play.
Totally. 100%. So when we're looking at these, we're talking about trauma and these emotional things, why is it that one of them, and not to say, because like you mentioned, addiction is a thing. There's a lot of ways we can look at that. But when we're looking specifically at sugar, when we're looking at trauma and emotional, being disconnected from ourselves and all the things you just mentioned, why is it that sugar is the thing that we turn to?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many reasons. So a couple things here, like from a societal standpoint, it's something that is really ingrained and used in our society for that purpose. So if you're feeling discomfort or you're feeling sad, it's the quickest, easiest, cheapest, most socially acceptable substance that we could use, right? Like, it's not as socially acceptable when you're having a hard day to go home and do cocaine, right? But if you're having a hard day at the office, you can pop a cupcake in and a caramel frappuccino from Starbucks. Nobody's going to think twice, right? So it's such an easy escape in the eyes of society, right? And it also gives us this sense of fitting in. Everybody else is doing it. Everybody else is going for the Starbucks run at lunch and just pounding the candy at their desk, in the afternoon when they're feeling exhausted, right? Or just even thinking about, you're never going to watch movies the same after I say this, but looking at movies and shows, right? Every time there's some sort of difficult situation for a woman, whether she gets dumped or she loses her job or something dramatic happens, right? The message is always go get wine, get together with your girlfriends, drink a ton of wine or alcohol, right? And eat junk, like get the ice cream out. So we're getting this messaging in marketing, in the movies, just with the people in our lives, because it's become so ingrained in our society. And a big piece of this that, I hate sharing, but is important to share is the food industry that runs all of our food.
The world.
They're brilliant. They know how addictive sugar is as a substance. They've spent billions of dollars studying how to light up the pleasure centers, the dopamine centers in your brain to the maximum amount, how to really get your taste buds hooked on sugar. And they use this in marketing, right? In movies, in billboards, like to really subliminally teach you ever since you're a child that this is just how you cope. This is what you do, right? Everyone's doing it. You deserve a break, have a Kit Kat, right? Like the commercials all over are all about that emotional connection with sugar. So those are kind of the sociological pieces and the psychological pieces, but there's also, of course, the very physical pieces, right? Why is sugar the go-to? Because it feels good and it tastes good and it makes you feel amazing for a minute until you have a sugar crash, right? Or if you're on sugar all day long, you might never actually get the crash because you're constantly feeding the pleasure center in your brain, right? So there's a very very physical response in the brain, right? Where your centers are firing. The debate is out there now. They're saying that it's very similar to the way that cocaine actually activates your pleasure centers, which is why sugar is just as, if not more addictive. So I think there's so many reasons that sugar is the go-to, but there's a lot. There's the political stuff, there's the food industry, there's our physical reaction to sugar. And I think the biggest piece is that societal piece, right? I mean, if you're sad, your friend's coming over with cupcakes, right? Or baking you something, or, it's ingrained in all of our holidays and all of our traditions and how we celebrate and how we deal with sadness. And so those are the pieces that really have taught us that that's the go-to.
Yeah. So then, I mean, assuming we can't, change the world and all we will.
Yeah. We're doing it one person at a time, one podcast at a time.
That's right. What am I trying to ask? What are the shifts? Like, what is the shift? And I know this is, it's a loaded question, but what are the shifts that have to happen? And I know there's monumental shifts that have to happen from like a societal perspective, like we're just talking about, but what are the little shifts that we can make to start building that healthy relationship with food? I mean, obviously dealing with your trauma is one thing, and you mentioned that, but what are the other things we can do just kind of like day to day, week to week kind of thing to really help foster that healthy relationship?
Yeah. Yes. What can we do? Right. Yeah. This question now, like, oh my goodness, this is bad, Dani. Like, what do we do? So there's no one thing to do. Okay. And we're all very unique in our journey and our personalities and what works for us. So just acknowledging that here, I'll give some suggestions, but it's really about trying things on for yourself and starting to explore. And I think for everyone listening, the most important place to start, and we're doing that here in this conversation, is just awareness, right? Awareness of what's going on, like at a societal level, right? And use your anger about that for good, right? Because you can make so many changes, right? You can look at an advertisement and instead of caving in for it, call them out on it and say, no, I'm not falling for your advertising in the grocery store, right?
Right.
So you can start to use that to empower you. So definitely, continue bringing the awareness around sugar addiction, around how sugar actually works in the body, around how the food industry knows and uses that against you. Start doing your own research, watch documentaries, like get empowered with that knowledge and that awareness of what's going on. And then start bringing that awareness into your own unique situation with sugar. So again, this doesn't look one way, but one of the things that I love having most of my clients start with is even just starting to build that like emotional understanding and awareness. So before you eat anything, just taking a minute, not even 30 seconds, to even maybe close your eyes and put your hands on your heart, take a deep breath, and just check in with how am I feeling right now? Or what's present for me right now? And you might not get an answer. You might get an answer. And if you keep track of that over 3 to 4 days, if not a week would be even better, you're going to start to notice patterns. Like, wow, I eat every time I'm stressed, right? You're going to start really noticing that, wow, I'm not eating because of hunger. I'm eating because of an emotion or because I'm lonely and I'm craving something and emotion. So starting to build that connection is a really great spot to begin. And then obviously, well, not obviously, but a piece of that then, building on the emotional part, foundational crack, as well as the disconnection from self. I always love, and this is harder than it sounds, right? But I love getting all of my clients to really get in the practice of spending some time every day, even just 10 minutes in stillness and silence with themselves. This doesn't have to be a formal meditation. This can be sitting on your back deck, drinking a cup of tea, watching the birds, right? But no distractions, no phone, no podcast, right? Other than this one, but really just like really honoring some time to go inward. I'm a big fan of closing my eyes and having my hands on my body. It really helps me tune and drop into my body. So having these moments of peace and stillness with yourself is when you'll start to get messages, right? You'll start to tune into your intuition. You'll start to feel more peaceful and calm. This is why meditation is so popular, right? It works. So really, that's an important place to start, to really start acknowledging maybe emotions that need to come up or thoughts or fears or, whatever it is that needs to come up that day and be heard is only going to happen when you take a minute to pause. And we just don't do that, right? We don't do that. We live in this world that's go, 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 go. And I was like that all the time. The last 6 years of my journey has been a relearning how to slow down and how to redefine what success looks like to me and calm my nervous system, get out of an activated state 24/7. Yeah. So that's a really beautiful place to start, is just, obviously bringing some awareness to the emotional connection with every time you eat, spending time in stillness, right? Just taking 10 minutes for yourself every morning and then building up from that to have more of that throughout the day where you could just be with your own thoughts, be with your body. And then the next piece, and I didn't really mention this yet, but I'll quickly mention it here, is how important community is. So when it comes to food, right, and our tricky relationship with sugar, one of the things we didn't talk about, right, is the amount of guilt and shame that we carry, and the shame that we carry in our bodies. And when we are in a group of other women who are supporting us in a beautiful, non-judgmental, open, safe space, which unfortunately not all communities are. So that's really important that I'm saying this has to be a safe space where you feel like you can be vulnerable and that you're not going to be met with judgment or blame or all of this toxic extra shame that we don't need. So a space where you can really be yourself and you feel comfortable and you feel like you can drop in and you feel like you can share your wounds and you can talk about the shame, because that's how we actually heal shame is by talking about it and working through it in a safe space. So that's really what I could have mentioned this at the beginning of our talk, but summing it up is really like my approach to helping women really break through sugar addiction and build a healthy relationship with sugar that lasts for life is really based around the 3 pillars that we're kind of talking about here. So the one is the physical cleanse of sugar. We have to detox from sugar. We need to get out of our body for a period of time. Pillar number 2 being the inner work that we've been talking a lot about, these cracks in the foundation. And pillar 3 being the community, the safe, supportive space where we can be ourselves and practice exploring, who am I? What is my true self? Right. And know that we're not going to be judged and we're just met with open arms and love and that sort of piece. It's really profound. It's actually the reason why I don't do one-on-one coaching anymore. And I only do groups is because I've seen this healing that we do, especially as women, we're meant to do in community. We're meant to do in collective. We're not, it's not an individual journey that we're on, by the way. This is all of us. And we have the same struggles with a different flavor, but the same struggles, the same challenges, the same limiting beliefs and traumas and all of this stuff. So working on that together in the right type of community is vital for long-term success.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's such a good point. And I love the piece about awareness. And I talk about this all the time too, because I mean, it translates to everything, right? The awareness piece. And I think like I do a similar thing with my clients with the, you were talking about having them like tune into themselves. I have them do a similar thing where they do this little food journal, and it's not just like, oh, I ate this for breakfast and ate this for lunch, but it's like they're tracking what they're eating, but then I'm also asking them, how did you feel before you ate? And how did you feel after? And thinking about their emotions and their feelings and things before, during, and after. And it's always funny because like, the first day of their journal, it's like super quick. Like I felt hungry, I felt, whatever. And then by like, the third day or whatever after, it's like, they're finally connecting dots and they start to get super detailed. And then we have a conversation about it. And it's like, oh, now I can see what triggered this, what triggered that. And the fact that I forgot that I drank all this caffeine in the morning on an empty stomach. And then I was feeling anxious and my anxiety, they're starting to connect dots and stuff. So the awareness piece, it's so huge. But I like that you also mentioned awareness in terms of like education and information too, because especially with sugar, like you mentioned, like watch a documentary, like there's so many documentaries out there that are educating people. And I think that's the other piece of this is that people just don't know. Like we hear sugar's bad. Like we hear that and we're like, okay, sugar's bad forever. It causes diabetes. And I think that's the extent of it is we think, oh, it just causes diabetes or something, especially in the United States. But I think we don't really understand the implications of it and how, and then again, this is like going down a rabbit hole, but how we're being like controlled and manipulated by like the food industry, right? Like that information piece is a huge piece of this and understanding the reality of the situation.
Yeah. And the piece that I know we haven't had time to talk about, but the very physical components, right?
Yes.
The damage that this overdosing on sugar that we're doing every day, whether or not we know it. I know a lot of people are surprised. They think, no, I'm good. And then they track their sugar and their mind is blown.
Yep.
It's hiding in like 90% of the products at the grocery store. It is, they're sneaky. Let me say that. But the damage that it's doing to our hormones, right? At especially as we age and go into perimenopause and menopause, right? Like this is when women usually start to notice, why am I not losing weight like I used to? And, it's starting to add up, right? And the fact that blood sugar dysregulation and metabolic disorder are now being understood as really the root of every single chronic disease.
Yep. Everything.
Right. And it's not just as simple as like, oh, it causes inflammation and then cancer grows. No, it's a lot more complex, but this blood sugar dysregulation that most human beings are living with, especially in North America, is really, really, really leading to every disease.
Yeah.
Whether it's diabetes or heart disease or cancer or Alzheimer's, right? Now being called diabetes 3.
Right.
So, we need to take this seriously, right?
Yeah.
And we really need to do our research. And I think that part is important. I know for me, it was really important at the beginning to empower myself to really, really scare myself, right? Really understand this is bad, right? Because it's so easy when we don't have awareness. We think, it's not that bad. It's fine. Yeah, sugar might cause diabetes, but I don't need that much. And I hydrate and exercise, so I'm good, right? So the more you learn, it does take some courage to take our head out of the sand
for sure,
and really start facing the truth. And then from there, we can make decisions. Do you want to make a change or not? There's no judgment there. I mean, we at least have the knowledge then to decide for ourselves instead of just being swept along with mainstream society to do things differently if we want, or just to be curious and to through that, I think for a lot of women, that really is a helpful motivator to go, oh boy, I really do need to do something about this and at least get started with maybe minimizing or doing what I can around the sugar.
Yeah, for sure. It's such a good point. Well, and I love the pillars. I love the 3 pillars because I think that's like we said at the beginning. I mean, most of us think about the physical pieces, but we don't really understand the emotional, mental, all those other pieces that are involved. And that leads me to my next question, because I know, for most of the women that I talked to on this show, everybody's journey or their path kind of started with their own journey. So what was your journey with sugar? What did that look like and how you got into this space?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. I'll try to keep it brief. Most of this is hindsight now looking back. Like my real shifts for myself and awareness really started about 7 years ago, I think now. I keep saying 6, but it must be 7 by now. So it's probably 7 years now. But looking back even to my childhood, like I was always addicted to sugar. I loved sugar. I always had a sweet tooth. I was a picky eater. I only ate the white stuff, like white pasta, white bread, candy. The only color I ate was like red dye number 5, whatever. So I loved it. Right. And my mom was and still is a sugar addict. It was very much a part of my upbringing. And for most of us, like we didn't know any better. Like it wasn't a thing that people were scared of. It just tasted good and it was amazing. Why wouldn't we eat it? So, I've been overdosing on sugar my whole life, which really continues to lead into that. And it wasn't until I was actually out of university and working at a job that was, in light terms, sucking my soul. miserable, very traumatic time of my life, just being in that environment that I was in with the people that I was surrounded by. But I know it was an important part of my journey. And that was really the time of my journey where I noticed the emotional piece. I noticed how I was so disconnected from my work and my true calling. I was miserable. I was depressed. I was anxious all day. I was stressed. I was overwhelmed. I would come home and I would just numb out. I would have wine. I would have Netflix. I would have candy. I would have pasta. Like I would just like the trifecta of like cope and numb out and escape from this horrible feeling. So that was really the rock bottom of my emotional connection, and really where I started understanding that it was this, I was emotionally using food to escape. And I realize now, again, in hindsight, with the deep healing that I've been doing, is that really came from childhood with me, and really learning that it wasn't okay to express emotions. No one in my family expressed my emotions. My mom always had her shit together, always had a brave face on. And I was the one that was always crying and falling apart. And I was pointed at for that. Like, Dani, stop being so sensitive. Dani, just suck it up. And I learned to suck it up and put these walls up around my emotions instead of actually honoring them and learning how to work with them and support them and go out for a walk and release them and shake and get rid of them, right? Have a little dance party, which is my go-to now when I'm feeling some things come up, just support myself. Right? Yeah. So that was really where my emotional eating really came from. And it tied in with obviously the very physical addiction that was going on, having overdosed on sugar my whole life and all through university and all of that. So my turning point actually didn't really happen until, like I said, it was about 7 years ago. My husband and I, thank goodness, knew enough to quit our jobs. And we went and traveled in South America for a year. Wow. And that was really the start of huge shifts in a lot of ways in my spiritual growth and my own inquiry into what I wanted out of life and my true purpose. And just, it was a really big soul journey, right? Like we should make a movie out of it kind of thing. But it was in that whole process that I kind of hit rock bottom with food and feeling miserable and horrible in my body and gaining weight and just brain fog and PMS and just all of the junk that was going on because of the way I was eating. And I started really seeing that I wasn't nourishing myself. I started becoming really fascinated in nutrition on that trip, just witnessing how other cultures, they actually cooked their own food. What? They didn't go to takeout and get a
novel idea.
Novel, right? So what? It's not coming from a package?
Right.
You went to the market and bought ingredients? What? So I started really seeing things differently and also noticing in my body what it felt like when I ate vegetables and I ate real food. So that shift really, really started there. And then it was when, within the weeks of coming home, actually right before coming home, that my husband and I both went through our accidental sugar detox. So we've been eating like junk our whole lives. And especially on this trip, long bus rides, just eating all the cookies and cakes and stuff. And we lived at a yoga center in the middle of the Colombian jungle for about 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And we just ate off the land. So
that's
the first time I've ever done that. Yeah, it was spiritually amazing and physically challenging because I didn't know it at the time, but we were both detoxing from processed food. We were eating whole real foods. And I remember feeling sick and I had a headache and I would wake up in the middle of the night starving and my body was so confused. But it was the start of that. At the end of that, I really noticed my taste buds had changed and I came home and I wanted to have all these sugary things, but I didn't want them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, I don't actually that's gross.
Yeah.
I had my first Starbucks drink coming back to Canada and I was like, oh, I can't drink this. So that was really the spark for me in realizing okay, there's something going on here with my sugar cravings and that I've been addicted to sugar my whole life. And I want to get back in control of that. So that's when my journey really started. And it's been a wild ride.
Yeah. What a ride. Wow. And it's crazy too, because I find that you were talking about how you feel really crappy on your accidental detox. And it's so funny because I talk to clients all the time where, and I try to tell them you might feel worse before you feel better when we're kind of working on, the anti-inflammation part of our protocol. But that's what it is. Your body's wait a minute, what's happening here? And you do see it's like a, like a drug addict that's detoxing from drugs.
Yeah, which is another reason for those people who are thinking, sugar addiction doesn't exist. This is something that people made up.
Yeah.
It's very scientifically proven. The body goes into shock, right? Of like, where is my constant hit of glucose, right? Or cocaine or whatever drug you're giving it.
Right.
Or coffee, right? I mean, that's why people, when they go off coffee, we understand that coffee is a drug, right? And then we get the headaches and fatigue. And this is I'm glad that you mentioned that, because oftentimes women will go into maybe a sugar detox. And if they're not in the right community or the support, they'll get a week or two in and still be feeling miserable or still be feeling bad. And they'll just think it's not working and give up. Right. Because it's hard on the days when your whole body aches because your joints are detoxing. Right. And you have a headache and you're exhausted and you're extra moody. You're like, wait, I thought I was supposed to get less moody.
Right.
Right. So it's having someone or some community to get you over that gap is really important, because at the other end of that is just ultimate, freedom and energy and health. Right.
For sure.
So,
well, and it is, Melinda, just speaks to one of the pillars you're talking about, the pillar of community. It speaks to that, the importance of community. And because, it is a lot harder to, even if it's, with anything, it doesn't necessarily have to be, getting off sugar, whatever, but it's a lot harder to do by yourself when you're going through the bumpy spots and you're by yourself and you're like, well, this isn't working, or, this sucks. Or that community piece is huge.
Which, by the way, ladies, any women listening, right? We need to get out of this belief system that we're meant to do hard things alone.
Yeah.
Like we have this pillar that I'm a successful woman only if I struggle with everything on my own.
Yeah.
Right. I'm in charge of raising the kids. I run this full-time company and I do all the things, and that makes me special. And it doesn't. It really, really doesn't. It actually, it's not a sign of success. Yeah. It's really important to understand that we as human beings are not meant to do things alone, especially hard things, right? This is why we've thrived before the agricultural revolution and industrial revolution in tribes and in communities, right? Where we raised kids together. We did the laundry together at the river. Like we cook together as women, right? Like we do things we go through divorces together. We grieve losses together. Like these are all community activities. And we've gotten so far away from that. And I just really want anyone listening to this who's putting themselves on a pedestal, I'm lovingly calling you out that that's not the way. That's not the way to create a happy and healthy life. You're going to continue being miserable if you continue believing that you should be doing it on your own. And that makes you a strong woman. I think strong women are the ones who actually acknowledge when they need support, right? And they actually ask for support and acknowledge their emotions and go against what society is teaching them. To me, that's the definition of true strength.
Absolutely. That's such a great point. And that's something y'all can take with you in whatever capacity you want, because I feel like that's and I've learned that in my own journey too. And especially in my brick and mortar business, I've had the longest. And I know for the longest time, I knew I needed help. Like I knew I was doing all the things. For a long time, doing all the things myself. And I totally tore up my adrenals, and I was running my body into the ground. And that was me, where it was like, no, I can do this. It's, want to be that strong, independent woman, and that's kind of the other piece in society that teaches, which, there's nothing wrong with being independent, but that also being independent doesn't mean you don't ask for help. Like that's not really what that means. It's like, that's not what I think it means. But I think that was definitely something that I worked through too. And I think that's a tricky, what is the word I'm looking for? It's that, I can't think of what I'm looking for, but it's tricky, that piece of kind of idolizing that, the strong, independent woman. And like my husband says, strong, independent woman who don't need no man. Like that's fine and all, but you don't necessarily need a man, but you do need community. Like there's a piece of that. And I had a guest not too long ago, I think his episode's coming out next week, and he has a book, and it's like the difference between health and vitality. But he was talking about like scientific research around stress and what happens to like your neurotransmitters during stress, and like oxytocin, which is like the love hormone, right? Like when you're in a stress situation, there's a bunch of hormones and things going on when you're stressed, but oxytocin is one of them. And he was like, this is like by design, like God made us, or source, whatever, universe, whatever you call it, made us that when we're stressed, we're releasing this specific chemical. That means that we need, like, that's drawing in community. So when you're stressed, to be able to work, collaborate. And that was like so profound to me, that our bodies are designed to desire community in a stressful situation. Like that, we're wired that way.
Yeah.
And we just kind of push that off.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
I believe that. We are meant. I've heard that about our tears as well. Like they shine a different way when we're sad, to like attract people to know that we need support.
Yes. Yes. I've heard that too.
We do. We're not meant to do this alone. And like you mentioned, right? and this is really important, we can, ladies, like as women and any human being, we are capable of absolutely anything and doing anything that we want. We can build the businesses and run the family, and we can do it all. Totally. Absolutely. But we shouldn't do it all by ourselves, right? We can, and we're totally capable and we are so powerful and amazing. But like, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do it by yourself.
Right. For sure. Well, and at least in terms of business, and I mean, I guess probably any other scenario too. It's like the longer you wait to ask for help, you're really stifling your growth. And I think that's true for any personal development or health goal or anything. It's like you're stifling your growth and your ability to really move on the trajectory you want to go on by not asking for help. You're just kind of stifling your growth. And yeah, that
was very much my journey of like with sugar for like a good 2 years. I was struggling on my own, like trying to figure it out. It was over 2 years, I think. And at the same time, starting my own business and struggling on my own. And it wasn't until I started asking for help and hiring mentors and working with coaches like that everything started to change.
Absolutely.
I shouldn't be doing this alone.
Yeah.
Got it. Message received.
Exactly. It's exactly it. Okay. So I have a couple more questions I want to ask you. Leaving people with, and you've given some great like nuggets and jewels for everybody to take with them, but leaving people with, if they want to like get on the train tomorrow, what are the first 2 or 3 things that you would tell somebody to kind of start this restoration process, I guess is what I'm going to say, with their relationship with sugar? What are the first couple things to hone in on?
Love it. Okay. So get out there and watch something. Okay. Whether it's on YouTube or on Netflix, there's documentaries, watch something, learn from someone. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Robert Lustig's work as well. He's one of the leading whistleblowers on the sugar industry and all of that. So he's got some talks on YouTube, I think.
Cool.
So go watch something and then start tracking your sugar intake. This is really eye-opening. So no judgment, no shame, simple curiosity, become an investigator over the next week in tracking how much sugar is actually coming in. And really just paying attention to that. And then, like I've mentioned as well, I think a really important place as you're tracking your sugar intake to also start tracking your emotional connection to food. So whenever you're about to eat something, just check in with your body. Like, are you feeling tense? You might not be able to label an emotion. By the way, there's a lot of women that just are so disconnected from their emotions. They can't even label it, which is totally fine. That's just a part of your own journey and it's not impossible, but just tune into sensations in the body. Then maybe you're tight in the jaw, or you just had a fight with your husband and now you're in the cupboard looking for food, right? So just pay attention to what's going on there. And then, coming back to, I think that other piece that I've already shared around just booking in some time to be in stillness with yourself every day. Those are really simple places to start. And then of course you can go from there. And after you've tracked your sugar, you can start actually reading labels at the grocery store. I mean, that's where I started. Simple, easy. You can grab the salsa that doesn't have added sugar versus the one that does, and the salad dressing that doesn't, right? So you can just slowly start making some swaps with the really like simple things in your life that might be where sugar's sneaking in, right? Like in your yogurt and your salad dressing and your protein bars and all that stuff. Just start making those small changes.
Simple swaps. Yeah, for sure. Such good advice. So I have one more question I want to ask you before I ask you that. Can you let everybody know where to find out more about you and what you're doing and helping women with this just freedom that they're looking for around sugar?
Yes. Yeah, you can definitely come and find more about my programs and also free 3-part video series that I have available on my website around emotional eating. That's DanielleDaem.com. You can find me there. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube at Danielle Daem. And my podcast is probably the best place to come and really learn more about my approach and dive deeper into these topics. So that's called the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. Those are definitely the best places to connect with me and dive in deeper.
Perfect. And of course, I have the links to all that in the show notes, so I can go check all of that out. The last question I want to ask you is, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Ooh, yeah. What comes up right away is just practice being authentic, right? Like tapping into your authentic self in whatever way that is. And when we do that, you're going to know what your purpose is. Right? You're going to really be in tune with your higher self and really, that part of you that has that calling.
Yeah, I love that.
Be you.
Yes, be you. Words to live by and a great note to end on. This is so great, Dani. Thank you so much for sharing. This is so insightful. And there were so many good takeaways here. And I know women, all the ladies listening, are going to have a lot to work with all the information you passed on. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thanks everyone for staying till the end and listening. Please reach out if you have any questions. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, I hope to be back again someday soon.
Totally. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I know how I can provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics that you want to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza or visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.